sessions. First of all, I would like to apologize for the minor delay. We were still sorting some other issues concerning to the event, but we are ready to kickstart our event. First of all, I would like to ask our speakers who are going to make presentations today to make their way to the front. We have reserved these seats for them. Ms. Roro, Dr. Felix Dube, I kindly request that we assemble to the front so that there will be a smooth transition to the podium when you have to deliver your presentation. Colleagues, our event today is a seminar on severity and ambiguity in global governance, exploring China's military drills in Taiwan. This is, of course, interconnected with military law and criminal justice. I think before we proceed, I wish to just draw the attention of those physically present that our restrooms are just right to the corner. You turn left, and then again you turn left. That is where you will find the restrooms. And to our colleagues online, thank you very much for joining. We will be swiftly engaging together as well to the chats and your engagements to the presentations that have been made here. I quickly want to just go through the program today. We have an address by Professor of Law, Angelo Dube, who is the acting director of School of Law at UNISA's College of Law. And then we also have a representative from UNISA Law Student Association, Ms. Panish Zororo. And then we have our guest speaker, Mr. Weekend Fakele, from the University of Western Cape, who is also going to deliberate today. And also we have Dr. Felix Dube from UNISA, who is also going to present today. And thereafter, we will have an answer and question session in which the presentations by the speakers, we are going to engage them thoroughly. So colleagues, why are we here today? We are here today so that we gauge knowledge, which when we leave today, we leave a better understanding of the challenges posed by China's military presence in Taiwan, with a deeper appreciation of the importance of severity and ambiguity in global governance, the identification of possible solutions to the challenges posed by China's military drills in Taiwan. Last, dare I say least, the development of network of experts and the policymakers interested in global governance and security issues in the field of Asia-Pacific region. The idea is not to be long, and I'm going to call to the podium Professor of Law, the Director of School of Law, Prof. Angelo Dube, to come and give us a thorough exposition of the event today. Professor, we are ready to receive you.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen.
Good morning.
And welcome to our first series in a three-part series on mainstreaming military law and criminal justice in the higher education sector. But before I proceed, and I hope I'm audible even to the online audience, before I proceed, I would like to just go through the salutations, greet the following. Ladies and gentlemen, as introduced, my name is Professor Angelo Dube, the Acting Director of the School of Law within the College of Law at UNISA. I would like to send my salutations to the following in absentia. Good morning to the Principal and Vice Chancellor of the University of South Africa, Professor Puleng Nkabula. Good morning to the Dean of the College of Law, Professor John Olaute Kole, and his Deputy Executive Dean, Professor Fari Butelene Makonde. A grand morning to the Director of our within the College, the School of Criminal Justice, Dr. Lebogang Moroti. I have a hearty good morning to the head of the UNISA Law Clinic and other portfolios within the College of Law. Good morning to our esteemed guests from within the Republic and abroad, Good morning from our friends from the Taipei Liaison Office, Republic of China and Taiwan, who are visiting us as observers, as guests today. Good morning to all of you, ladies and gentlemen, to the heads and COTs of departments, portfolio managers, directorates within UNISA, and to my speakers who heeded the call when they were asked to come and join us on this inaugural event where we try and interrogate the concept of mainstreaming military law and criminal justice in a three-part series, this being the first of those three. Let me not forget to greet the student leaders or the leaders of the various student formations who are with us today, especially the UNISA Law Students Association and every other member of staff that assisted us in putting together this particular event that we have today. To you all, I say, Sanbonani, Dumelang, Bunjani, Absheni, Dimacheroni. Your presence and participation are deeply appreciated. Namugelekile, ilomhlangano namhlanje. Ladies and gentlemen, both the executive dean and the deputy are away this morning, attending other pressing university matters. They tender their apologies. They would have loved to be with us here in this room, but there are so many other investor engagements that require their presence. So in my capacity as acting director of the School of Law, I therefore represent the deanery and welcome you all. What is this mainstreaming international military law and criminal justice? Let me give a brief background. Military law and criminal justice tends to be underrepresented in the higher education sector. In noticing this lacuna, the University of South Africa began a series in 2022 focused on mainstreaming this branch of law into the ordinary curriculum and discourse in the university community. The first series was held last year and focused on conflict and gangsterism. From that pilot session, the team went back and brainstormed and found it plausible to expand this one event into a series of 3 seminars every year, focused on the process of mainstreaming military law, and criminal justice into the higher education sector. Why is this important? UNISA is a pioneer in many respects. For 150 years, we have delivered quality distance education to a diverse student community scattered across the globe, not only to be lead in the provisioning of education via technology. We also want to be first movers and pioneers in many disciplines in the higher education sector. These include the aerospace sector and the aviation sector, marine studies, and these are areas that, and this particular area that we are congregated about here today, that is to mainstream military law and criminal justice into the curriculum. Our 150 years of existence must be colored by seminars of this nature, where we showcase our ability to interact with global events and analyze how they affect us as an institution and the continent of Africa. So why are we here today? In recent months, China has conducted a series of military drills in the waters around Taiwan, which have raised concerns in the international community about the potential conflict in the region. These drills have included large-scale air and naval exercises, as well as missile tests, and these have been interpreted by many as a show of force by China against Taiwan. The tale of 2 Chinas goes like this. We have mainland China, which sits on the UN Security Council. That is the People's Republic of China. Then we have the Republic of China and Taiwan, largely known as Taiwan. China claims sovereignty over Taiwan, which it considers to be a renegade province that will eventually be reunited with the mainland. Taiwan, on the other hand, is a democratic state that has operated independently since the end of the Chinese Civil War. The 2 sides have maintained an uneasy peace for decades, but tensions have been rising in recent years as China has become increasingly assertive in its territorial claims in the region. The latest round of Chinese military drills began in late 2021 and continued into early 2022. These exercises involve a wide range of military assets, including warplanes, submarines, and aircraft carriers. China has said that these drills are routine and designed to improve the readiness and capabilities of its armed forces. However, many analysts have interpreted the drills as a signal to Taiwan and to the international community that China is prepared to use force if necessary to assert its claim over the island. Taiwan has responded by increasing its own military readiness and has sought support from the United States and other allies in the region. The US has a long-standing policy of supporting Taiwan's security and has sold weapons to the island in order to help it to defend itself against potential Chinese aggression. The Biden administration has also reaffirmed the United States' commitment to the Taiwan Relations Act, which commits the US to helping Taiwan defend itself against threats. Other countries in the region have also expressed concern about the latest round of drills. The Chinese government has responded to these concerns by accusing the United States and other countries of interfering in China's internal affairs, and it has also criticized Taiwan for seeking to increase its ties with foreign powers, particularly the United States. The latest round of Chinese drills over Taiwan underscores the complex and potentially volatile nature of the situation in the region. The issue of Taiwan's status is one of the most sensitive and contentious in Chinese politics, and dare I say, in world politics too. And any attempt to resolve it could have far-reaching consequences for regional stability. While the risk of direct conflict between China and Taiwan remains relatively low, the continued build-up of military assets in the region and the heightened tensions between the two sides suggests that the situation could quickly escalate if either side feels its security threatened. It is therefore crucial that all parties in the region work to reduce the tensions and to find a peaceful solution to the Taiwan issue that respects the rights and interests of all parties involved. Could China's military drills be regarded as an affront to sovereign equality in international law? This is the question that comes to mind. The invasive act of the Chinese military, not being the first, caused controversy in light of its aggression and departure from the conduct of international relations within the mold of diplomacy. The difference with the recent encircling of Taiwan by Chinese war aircraft is that, unlike in previous instances, these drills also occurred towards the eastern side of Taiwan, the furthermost part of the territory, and not contiguous with mainland China. In other words, this time around, the Chinese aircraft did cross the sensitive median line of the Taiwan Strait, which previously served as an unofficial barrier between the two sides. We know that diplomacy has for millennia been the bedrock of international relations. In African tradition, known to have practiced diplomacy as a means of interstate, inter-kingdom, and inter-empire relations prior to colonization, diplomacy averted so many unnecessary wars and conflicts. The emissaries of foreign kings were protected and offered hospitality. Thus, traveling diplomats enjoyed protection on foreign soil, and this allowed for peaceful coexistence amongst sovereigns. All these ancient African practices, which predate the Westphalian notion of statehood and interstate relations, are now embraced by most civilized nations. That is why it is very concerning when belligerence and aggression characterizes the manner in which one state relates to its neighbors. It is particularly more concerning when a state that perceives itself as a superpower targets and harasses its neighbor on account of its perceived military might. To understand the current tense relationship between China and Taiwan, it's important to look closely at three key points, namely sovereignty, ambiguity, and multilateralism. The sovereignty conundrum. An inquiry under this leg seeks to understand the Taiwanese situation by reference to the concept of sovereignty, one of the most critical areas in global governance today. The rise of China as a superpower, coupled with its military drills in Taiwan, has created a complex and challenging environment for countries around the world. While China argues that its military drills are a necessary part of its sovereignty, other nations fear that these pose a threat to regional security and stability. It is worth noting that China neither recognizes the sovereignty of Taiwan nor any claim to statehood that Taiwan might have. However, it's imperative to note that when a people have elected to use their self-determination to conduct their affairs as a standalone entity. The non-recognition of their efforts by one state does not give carte blanche to threaten and bully those people. It is not just how Taiwan is perceived in the eyes of mainland China that matters, but also imperative is to note that the problem also lies partly with the current status of Taiwan on the international plane. 13 countries worldwide recognize Taiwan's claim to statehood. This particular challenge notwithstanding, Taiwan does check all the boxes and requirements, all the boxes of the requirements that are contained in the Montevideo Convention on the Rights and Duties of States. Those of you who have done international law will know this particular convention, and every state that seeks to have a voice will derive its existence or its claim to exist as a state and its sovereignty from that particular convention. Now, turning to the ambiguity conundrum, when one looks at this new development, the question that begs an answer is why would the United Nations system fail to deal with the aggressive actions of the Chinese military? Ambiguity in the manner in which global governance is administered plays a critical role in this growing trend where supposedly more powerful states exert their power on smaller states or entities. Over and above the current Taiwan Straits issue, the aggression of Russia against Ukraine is also an illustrative case. Central to this problem is the perceived inconsistency of the UN's approach to enforcing international law and addressing human rights violations. The UN has been criticized for some time turning a blind eye to international law violations flowing from the actions of powerful states. It is accused of reserving its quick condemnation and concomitant action only for weaker states. This has led to accusations of double standards and bias in the UN's decision-making process. In the China-Taiwan issue, the fact that China sits as a permanent member of the P5, the permanent member states that constitute the UN Security Council, also means that it could also use its veto power at any point to frustrate any actions aimed at holding China accountable. We all know that the UN was set up as a multilateral system to deal with global governance and world affairs when the world descended into chaos in the 1940s. It is built on this principle of multilateralism, which is the belief that international cooperation is the most effective way to tackle common challenges and achieve common goals. We all know that there are strengths in the multilateral system. I need not rehash them here. It is worth noting that the UN's multilateral system has weaknesses, which have echoed from different spaces globally and continue to wreak havoc in global governance. One of the main criticisms of the UN is that it can be slow to respond to crises and emergencies. This is particularly because decision-making at the UN can be complex, especially at the UN Security Council level, where China sits as a member of the Permanent Five, who also wield the veto power. We saw that played itself out in the Russia-Ukraine situation as well. So why should Africa care? The same questions were asked when Russia and China were at loggerheads. The same questions can be asked even right now. Why should Africa care? These are happening away from African soil, far, far away. We learned a lot of lessons from the Russia-Ukraine situation. We saw the price of cooking oil going up. We saw the price of wheat going up. Africa, one way or the other, suffers. When two elephants fight, it is the grass that suffers. Ladies and gentlemen, from the lessons we have learned, that is why we are here today. That is why we have this dialogue today. That is why we're talking about mainstreaming military law and criminal justice into the higher education sector. We are discussing these issues that happen at the international level under the rubric of international relations, international law. But for us, we want to dovetail them into the area of mainstreaming military law and criminal justice. Without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, allow me to introduce our speakers. We have with us today Dr. Felix Dube, who is a postdoctoral fellow in the College of Law at UNISA. I should be reading out here his bio, and Doc will forgive me for this. The moment I got here, my computer got locked out of the system, and I've been struggling to log into my computer for the past 30 minutes. So whatever you sent me was locked in my computer. I don't have access to it. But Dr. Dube is a scholar of note. He's an analyst. Some of you, when you see his face, you will notice you might have seen him on TV analyzing one thing or the other, whether it's load shedding from ESCOM or some other issue that's of importance to the Republic of South Africa. He's also a publisher. He publishes a lot in many areas of the law. Also with us, who will be joining us virtually from Cape Town, is Mr. Weekend Mfagele. He is with the University of the Western Cape, and he is a scholar in the area of of international relations. He will also give us a talk on the issue that we're going to get to discuss today. Also with us is Miss Michelle Zororo. She's a leader in the student formations within the UNISA Law Student Association. We do this because we believe that young people also have a place in the conversations we have about the state of the Republic and the state of the globe that we live in. Ladies and gentlemen, without wasting your time, let me extend my gratitude for coming in here and being with us today, and for joining us online on this seminar, the first of a three-part series. Thank you very much. Over to you, Robert Director.
Thank you very much, Professor Angelo Dube, for the thorough exposition about the event today. Prof, you touched on various aspects of global governance, especially in as far as ambiguity and is concerned. Thank you very much, Prof. I believe everybody now is brought into context of why we are here today. And he also touched on why Africa should care, which that could answer a question anybody but have to say, look, why are we interested in discourses that do not entertain our continent? I believe if there was such a question in the mind of somebody, Professor Dube could have answered it. When I did my own research of the tension between Taiwan and China, I realized that US, the United States, is actually involved in it, that it has provided military as well as diplomatic support many times. Actually, the reason why we are here today to talk about these military drills in Taiwan is because the president of Taiwan, Mr. Wen, undertook a state visit to the US to meet with the Speaker of the House of Representatives. And China warned him before he did that. He said, look, you cannot go there, do not go there. Nonetheless, the president still went there, and immediately when he is back, and then there we find the military drills in Taiwan. That simply consolidates the conflict that Taiwan and China has. And our speakers will touch on that as well. So I'm going to call to the podium Mrs. Zororo, who has already been introduced, to also give us a thorough exposition of her perspective towards the discourse that we are having today. Over to you, Ms. Zororo.
Thank you, Program Director. Good morning. The chairperson of the session, distinguished guests, and esteemed members of the academic community, all protocols observed. I am truly honored to have been afforded the opportunity to engage in such a critical discussion where we're dealing with issues of sovereignty and ambiguity in global governance, with the particular focus on China's military drills in Taiwan. As we are all aware, the rise of China as a global superpower has had significant implications for international relations, particularly in the Asia-Pacific region. The military drills that are being conducted by China and Taiwan have been a cause for concern for many countries worldwide. And it is imperative that we carefully examine the multifaceted dimensions that this issue is bringing. I think I'll be looking at it from a military law and international law perspective. Sovereignty, a fundamental principle of international law and global governance, is at the heart of this topic. Sovereignty refers to the supreme authority of a state to govern its territory without the interference of external powers. However, it is important to note that sovereignty is never absolute, and it can be subject to change, and it can be subject to competing interests and interpretations. In the case of China's military drills in Taiwan, questions arise regarding the extent of China's sovereignty over Taiwan and the implications of these drills on Taiwan's sovereignty as well. Now, under international law, Taiwan is considered a part of China, as China claims that Taiwan is a province of its territory. However, when we look at Taiwan, we realize that Taiwan has its own province. It has its own government, its own military, and it conducts its own domestic and foreign affairs. And this has led to a complex situation in international relations. China's military drills can be seen as an accession of its sovereignty claim over Taiwan, but this has raised concerns about the potential violation of Taiwan's sovereignty and the principles of non-intervention and non-use of force under international law. Now, to shed a bit more light on this issue, I've tried to consider some principles in international law. The United Nations Charter, which is a cornerstone of international law, prohibits the threat or use of force against the territorial integrity or political independence of any state. It also enshrines the principles, the principle of self-determination, which recognizes the rights of peoples to determine their own political status without interference from external powers. In this case, when looking at China's military drills, questions arise regarding the compatibility of these principles with China's actions and whether they comply with the rules and norms of international law. Moreover, the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, which is another important international legal instrument, it establishes the legal framework for the use and conservation of the world's oceans and their resources. This convention recognizes the sovereignty of coastal states over their territorial waters, which extend up to 12 nautical miles from their baselines. In the case of these military drills in Taiwan, questions are also arising on the legality of such activities in terms of the UN Convention on the Law of the Seas and the potential implications of freedom and navigation, as well as regional security in the Taiwan community. And now, according to Stockholm International Peace Research Institute, China's military spending has increased significantly over the past decade. In 2020, China's military expenditure was estimated to be $252 billion, making it the second highest global spender after the United States. This increase in military spending, coupled with China's stance on territorial claims over Taiwan, has raised concerns among international communities about the potential implications of regional security, like I've already mentioned. Furthermore, ambiguity is another crucial issue in global governance and military affairs. Ambiguity would refer to the lack of clarity or uncertainty in the interpretation of international norms, rules, and agreements. In the context of the military drills in Taiwan, it arises in the interpretation of China's intentions and motivation behind these drills. Now, there's a question whether or not China is solely asserting its sovereignty over Taiwan, or is it signaling a more aggressive stance towards the region. This can complicate decision-making processes and exacerbate tensions, posing challenges for regional security and the peaceful resolution of disputes. Now, as we address these challenges, it is imperative that we explore potential solutions guided by military and international law. Dialogue, diplomacy, and multilateralism are key principles that can guide us in finding solutions to such issues. We need to be engaging in meaningful dialogue, and diplomacy can help build trust, foster mutual understanding, and facilitate peaceful resolutions in terms of this conflict in accordance to international law. Moreover, we need to be promoting a great understanding and cooperation among these different nations. Education, research, and academic engagement also play a pivotal role in understanding and bringing expertise in these global issues. Now, as responsible students, researchers, and leaders, we should be proactively engaging in these discussions, contributing to the development of innovative solutions, and advocating for a peaceful, cooperative approaches to global governance. In conclusion, the issues of sovereignty and ambiguity in global governance, particularly in this context of the China's military drills in Taiwan, are complex and multifaceted. It is imperative to appreciate the complexities of these issues. Imperative to appreciate, to seek meaningful solutions through dialogue and diplomacy, and to promote greater understanding and cooperation among the nations. By working together, we can contribute to a more stable, secure, and prosperous world. But ladies and gentlemen, after all is said and done, if we are to really look at it, we realize that this is not a fight between China and Taiwan, but it's more global, and it would be mostly related to the superpowers, China and the United States. Thank you, President.
Thank you very much, Ms. Michelle Zororo. As a student leader, with such an output that is well researched, one cannot help but compliment that. You are in the right track. You are an aspirant researcher of note, and I think that must be complimented, because it shows that the tutelage that you grasp from the College of Law under the leadership of the likes of Dr. Mhlongo and Professor Dube, Professor Mulemo, and everybody does not go to waste. It's infiltrated into your intelligence, and you are able to come here and deliberate heavily on these issues at hand today. In your conclusion, you make a very controversial statement to say this is not a fight between China and Taiwan. It is rather a small global issue. Please prepare a question in that we have to answer something from me because we need to clarify it. And I think even the panel, our colleagues, physical and online, might want to hear you elaborate further on that. But I'm not going to be long, colleagues. Our next speaker is our guest speaker from the University of Western Cape, Mr. Weekend Mfakele. He has joined us under classroom 3 online. Mr. Mfakele, we are ready to receive you. I just want to check on your side if you are ready also to come in.
Yes, hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear. We can hear you, Mr. Mfakele. You may proceed with your presentation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much for on direction. Okay. I think the last speaker has almost covered almost everything that I was going to cover in my presentation as well. But the only issue that I can add there, especially on the last point that she had made, is the issue of, the conflict between, the military drills that are being implemented by China on the territory of Taiwan. They are mainly driven by its concern about its national security, and even for that matter, Taiwan itself is not an independent state that is even recognized by the UN itself. So in such a case, there is even the issue of even America, even for that matter, he is having also its interests that are vested there in Taiwan. So I don't want to, repeat some of the things that have been covered by this speaker. So, the issue is more on, there is an issue of, especially the issue of politics, or let me say national interest, that are making the issue to be, are making this thing, that are making the China to, consider, implementing military drills on the territory of Taiwan. So I don't want to waste a lot of time. So I think those are the things that I thought I should add. And even the issue of BRICS, if I may add, the issue of BRICS and its developmental value, because I think one of the issues that is even making even America to be more interested on the issue of Taiwan is the issue of, there is a feeling that, there is a feeling that now America is no longer able to control the rest of the world. And in such a context, and even it is being threatened by the development of the BRICS developmental plan that is even also related to the issue of the trade wars that took place between China and America. So I think I will just end there.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Mfakele, for the wonderful presentation you've made. But I would like to implore you to engage us, at the question and answer session about the issue of national interest. when we come to the session of question and answer, just so we can engage and deliberate further, on this topic at hand. Yeah. Nonetheless, thank you very much for your input. It is well received and appreciated. You do touch on the fact that politics are involved here, and that is true, because when you look into the history of China and Taiwan, it actually emanated from the Chinese Civil War between the nationalists and the communists, which were involved in a political battle. And when one was defeated, they ran to an island, the island of Taiwan today, to form the Republic of China that we see today. And then from there, it has been such a political battle throughout. And the current generation were never there. They just inherited a beef that comes a long time ago. They just fought people fighting, and they just joined the fight as well. But thank you very much, Mr. Mfakele. We wish to engage you later on the Q&A session. Without wasting any further time, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to call to the podium Dr. Felix Dube, who will also come and touch on these issues that connect to sovereignty and ambiguity in global governance. Dr. Felix, we are ready to receive you, if you are also ready to receive us, to listen to you and engage with you further. Thank you very much, Dr. Felix. I think let's give him a round of applause.
Thank you, Program Director. I was going to say that I'm not ready because my speech has already been read out and said. All that can be said on the topic has almost been said, but I think there's still much to contribute to the discourse today. So, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests and fellow participants, it is my honor to be here today to be discussing a topic that has got far-reaching implications not only for the Asia-Pacific region, but also for Africa and the rest of the world, as far as matters of global peace and security are concerned. I would like to observe all protocol and also to acknowledge the presence of Mr. Cho and the rest of the delegation from Taiwan. Thank you for joining us today. I'm sure it is, I don't know how the feeling is, but as an African standing here and seeing a very big country like China showcasing force and surrounding a nation and throwing missiles and all those things, it scares me, and I wonder, how do the people from that region feel when those things are happening? So I'm also thrilled to be here because I get to meet the colleagues from the College of Law. Some I have never met, some I have met in a long time. It's nice to meet you, colleagues. So as I said, the program speaker, most of the things that one would have wanted to say have already been said, but we can extend our discussion and look at these things perhaps from a different dimension. And of course, the question has already been asked that why should we sit here in South Africa, tens of thousands of kilometers from Taiwan, discussing their dispute with China? And that has already been given, that we cannot afford to ignore the events that are happening there, because our world is interconnected. If you look in your bag right now or around you and you open your phone, you might see that there's a component from it that comes from Taiwan. So if Taiwan is being threatened, if aggression is happening to it, as probably a result of their massive manufacturing capacity in the chip industry, then you're not probably going to have that phone in the next few years. You understand? So we must ask ourselves, why are these drills happening now? But before we go there, I think we should really ask the question, are these really drills? What is a drill? Look at a fire drill. You're just preparing, or in the case of a fire, I want to know how to get out. But this is not a drill. This is a show of force. This is a show of aggression. This is a threat to the sovereignty of a country. So we need to understand why we might want to use the word drills, but I would like to see it as a show of aggression. So now that we have properly characterized this, we then have to ask ourselves, why is China doing this now? They have existed for a long time as independent states, separately so. Why are they doing it now? And the answer might even come to your pocket. It's for economic reasons and also for political reasons, and also just as a result of outright aggression. So when we speak about these Chinese drills or these Chinese incursions as I see them, we need to think about matters of sovereignty. We have to think about matters of self-determination. We need to speak about the need for non-aggression and the peaceful resolution of disputes. So as Africans, we can really not afford to ignore what is happening there. That is because China is such a big economy. They have invested so much in Africa right now, and they invested so much during the liberation struggles in many African countries. So we might feel, oh, you know, this is our big friend. They've always been there with us, and then we might want to ignore that, what they are doing there. But the problem with the global bullies is that they don't stop in one country. So today it could be Taiwan, tomorrow they can be coming for your own minerals in Africa. So you have to take a stand and say, we don't want global aggression. And I sincerely hope that the South African government and its partners in the BRICS can engage China on this and say, we don't need another global conflict. The world is already devastated by what is happening now in Ukraine. There is a huge humanitarian crisis, children are dying, and there is so much suffering across the globe. So we don't need another armed conflict across the world. And because China has invested so much in Africa, some of these governments and some of us may think, oh, well, you know, our developmental needs are actually more important than the sovereignty of the people of Taiwan. But I've already said, I believe that a less developed world is much better than a developed world that is facing a humanitarian crisis as a result of armed conflict. We do not need that. And I sincerely hope that the United Nations bodies and intergovernmental organizations across the world can actually look into this and see how can we solve this thing. China is already such a big economy and such a big country, such a big landmass. Do they really need another territory? Do they really need it? It's like what is happening here in South Africa, where somebody commits corruption and they buy a lot of things, but still they want to steal more because they want to have more. You find somebody having 16 cars or 20 cars, but they cannot keep on stealing because you cannot satisfy greed. You can satisfy your hunger, but you cannot satisfy greed. And the only way that you can stop global greed in the form of this aggression is for the international community to come together and say, look, we do not need this. We don't need this at this time, and we don't need it in the future. So the other speakers have already spoken about why is China doing these drills, and is it a bad thing, and why is it a bad thing? I'm just going to quickly add a few things and move on to the next section. So the Chinese have put together a few reasons that they advance as their course of action for why they're acting as they are doing in Taiwan. They are raising the issue of sovereignty, and it is very funny, and not actually funny, but tragically ironic, in that a country that is actually threatening another country can actually claim to be doing so in the name of sovereignty, because sovereignty is all about respecting the territorial integrity of another country and allowing it to govern itself as it deems fit. And then secondly, these Chinese are saying that they want to stop the Taiwanese people from formally declaring their independence and working as an independent state, and I think that argument is already not making sense at this moment. And of course, they are demonstrating their military preparedness, they are demonstrating their hardware and showcasing what they can do. Those are probably some of the reasons. But there are so many reasons why we don't want that conflict, why we don't want these drills. And the first thing is an escalation of hostilities and a disturbance of regional and global peace and security, because everybody right now feels threatened. The Americans have been devastating the Middle East. The Russians are devastating Ukraine. Now the Chinese want to go to Taiwan. And what is next? It's coming to your region. It's coming to your region. So you cannot afford to say, oh, well, it's happening there. I'm not affected. It is coming to your region. So that's why it is necessary for the world now to stand up and say, we need diplomatic efforts to resolve this. we need to respect the self-determination rights of the people of Taiwan. If they want to go to China, let them go, but it shouldn't be done by force. They should do it willingly. And of course, there is an impact of global governance, as already been said, because we are going to now enroll ourselves in interpreting these issues of sovereignty, these issues of self-determination, and so forth. And I certainly hope that the law professors here in public law will actually encourage the students to do research on this topic. Let them do research at LLB, let them do research at LLM, let them do research at LLD. Because the issue of sovereignty has become so ambiguous right now because it depends on who is powerful. The more powerful a country is, the more people are willing to actually keep quiet and say, you know what, we're not wanting to be involved in that. Look at what is happening in Palestine right now. It's apartheid at its worst, probably worse than what it was here in South Africa. So we need to actually revisit this topic of sovereignty. We need to revisit the issues of self-determination and ask ourselves, does the current international order protect sovereignty? Or it depends on who is acting against who? So I will just now quickly move over to the issues of sovereignty, perhaps in greater detail, because we know the importance of non-intervention in international law. No state must actually intervene in the affairs, in the internal affairs of another state, and no nation has got a right to interfere with the autonomy of another state. All disputes need to be resolved through a diplomatic process. So South Africa then finds itself in sort of a bind concerning this situation, and even with countries like Zimbabwe and other countries in Africa, to whom China actually contributed to independence. So these countries might feel a sense of gratitude, as I've already said, that China helped them, so they need to perhaps keep a neutral posture. But as they say, if you keep neutral in the face of aggression or in the face of injustice, you are actually not taking a neutral position. What you're actually doing is passively participating in that aggression. So we need to see Africa speaking more. We need to see the AU actually voicing itself about these issues. But then, how can the Africans do this? Especially when they owe the Chinese so much, especially when they depend on China so much. And I think it is to speak on our sovereignty. So as Africans, we need to get our house in order. We need to restart our manufacturing industries. We need to start providing the basics that can actually allow our economies to succeed in a way that we are less exposed to global pressure and global shocks. Then in that way, we'll be able to make a voice and say, look, this cannot be done. But right now, many African countries are actually afraid because they know they owe so much, or this project and that project. So I think we need to get our house in order so that we are able to speak against global aggression. Ladies and gentlemen, there is so much to say about the topic, but in the interest of time, I think we can end here. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Felix Dube. One of the objectives of this event today is to explore potential, solutions to the challenges that are posed by China's military drills in Taiwan, and also various other issues that are interconnected with the discourse at hand that might have not been addressed here. I think Dr. Felix Dube said quite a mouthful about these issues, and one of his outstanding statements is that our world is interconnected. One way or the other, we do need each other, and when there is a conflict or there is a sensitive issue happening in certain area or country or region, even though it might not literally affect us, one way or other, we are interconnected with it from there. No, thank you very much, Dr. Felix Dube, for the thorough exposition of this global phenomenon. Colleagues, we have come to the end of the presentation from our speakers, and we will now be going to the Q&A session from our attendees, physical, and as well as those who are joining us online. I think, first of all, we'll start with those who are in physical attendance to post their questions. And I will request that you perhaps direct to whom the question is directed to, or if it is then to whom it may concern, type of a question. And it might also be answered by any other person. Colleagues, any person who might have we have one from Tatem Sekwa, and then again there from my sister and the military guru, Advocate Mikua, military law guru, as well as Doctor of Laws, as Mr. Ganiming up there. So I think how are we going to do this? The mic is there. You need to please, I think on your left, as it can read, then you can ask the question. I'm not sure if then our speakers, our attendees online will be able to hear you talk, but I think you can just proceed to ask a question. Yeah, we'll come to the ones who are online. I've noted some of the few questions from those who are joining us online. You will come after. Mr. Mistake, I think you can go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much, Program Director, for the opportunity to ask this question. So my question is going to be very simple. As you have said, it's to whom it may concern. We'll be able to take it and clarify that.
You cannot hear you. You can hear you.
You can hear me.
Yes, please. You can hear. You are speaking very. Please.
Okay. No, I'll try to be loud. I thought I was loud enough. So my question is very simple. It relates to the principle of the R2P, the responsibility to protect. So my question is, who has the responsibility to protect the citizens of Taiwan against the military threats that China is operating on those particular citizens? So I would just love to get some light on that. And another question that I would like to ask, especially to Dr. Felix Dube, who has outlined the fact that, in actual fact, there are politics that are involved. I would like Dr. to shed some light on what should be the position of South Africa when it comes to these military threats that are being operated in the seas of Taiwan by China, considering the fact that South Africa and China are in some sort of a relationship based on BRICS, that particular relationship. What should be the position of South Africa with regards to these particular conflicts that are taking place in Taiwan by China? So that is just going to be those two simple questions that I've posed. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Msekwa. I think even your first question, Dr. Felix, I highly request that you perhaps touch on it. He is asking who then bears the responsibility to protect the people of Taiwan amid these life-threatening unfoldments. I think in your answer, Dr.
By the international community against a global superpower. It's only being involved by some of the global superpowers when they commit acts of aggression against others. For example, if you look at the issue of Iraq, when the US and its NATO allies went to Iraq, they said that the way invoking their duty to protect the people of Iraq against the government of that country. But the reality is that they were engaging in a self-serving exercise. But on the Taiwanese issue, the circumstances are different, and the problem is much wider than what we can say, because we are dealing with a situation where a member of the Security Council is engaged in aggressing a smaller nation. So if you were to invoke the responsibility to protect, then you've got a problem where you might as well trigger a third world war. So what we need right now, I believe that we need to find ways of protecting the Taiwanese people against aggression. And there are so many of them. These include diplomatic ways, they include economic ways, because I can tell you, especially for bigger economies, there is always a crack that opens up. So the international community needs to act together and ask itself what can be done to address this thing. And I do believe that if members of the UN come together and they actually act against this, they can have more impact than when one state is acting in this regard. And then the second question was, what should be South Africa's position regarding Taiwan? I think this is another complicated problem because of the issue of national interest. South Africa can say, no, you know what? We have so much trade with China, we have so much economic ties, they are our friends, they are BRICS. So we don't want to involve ourselves in their issues. But the problem is that if you've got a friend and that friend becomes a bully, you are complicit in their bullying unless you actually speak out. You actually speak to them to say, can't you do this in a more peaceful way? Can we find peace around this thing? And I believe that in this case, South Africa must be guided by principles, international law principles of non-aggression, diplomatic resolution of disputes, and actually encourage dialogue between these countries, because we've got the conflicts around the world where some countries are actually fueling the fire. So you need somebody who can put them together and say, guys, talk about this. You don't have to fight about this. And I think that is the most important thing that we can do. But we must speak against aggression. Thank you.
And thank you very much, Dr. Felix Dube. Just before we go to the next person to ask a question, we have a professor of international law. I think he might want to come in to deliberate on the RDP. I think exercising the powers that I have as a program director, I wish to abuse Professor Dube, who is an international law mastermind, to come and touch on the RTP, the responsibility to them. Professor Dube, please forgive me for this abuse, but I think you can say something that we can take home.
Thank you, Program Director. You can trust CPOT to throw you under the bus, but it's a bus I like nonetheless, the bus of international law. So your question is very, very important. RTP, the responsibility to protect. Dr. Dube has touched on it briefly. But remember, this is a 2005 agreement that the states of the world came together and agreed. It's a principle rather than a rule. So it's more of a wish list. It's more of a desire by states to say, we desire a world where there shall be a responsibility to protect. The political muscle, the economic muscle, the character and quality of a state determines how far this principle can go. There are three pillars to the responsibility to protect. The first pillar is recognizing the responsibility of a state to protect its own population. In this context, it will be the responsibility of either China or Taiwan to protect its own population in the event that it felt that it is threatened. The second is the responsibility of the international community to assist states in protecting their populations. The third pillar is the responsibility of the international community again to protect when a state is manifestly failing. So in the second leg, the state is not failing, it is able to protect its nationals. But other states come in and say, we're going to assist you in the process of protecting your nationals. In the third pillar, a state is failing to do so. The international community comes in and says, we can see you are failing. We are here because we're also sister states, we're also brother states. Let's assist you to protect your nationals. However, we are here today because we're dealing with ambiguity. We're dealing with the inconsistencies in global governance. You will notice how fast they were to move in when Gaddafi proposed one currency for Africa, when Gaddafi proposed dumping the US dollar and trading in an African currency. It was imperative for Gaddafi to be removed because the resources of the African continent had to continue to be illicitly taken out of Africa by corrupt Western companies. So that is the duplicity, that is the ambiguity we're talking about. That these principles are there, but the application is not consistent. When we have to move against Gaddafi, it's quick because there are quick wins there. The oil is there waiting for everyone to move in. France will move in and get whatever they can get out of there. The US can move in and get whatever they can get once they remove Gaddafi. Omar al-Bashir, on the other hand, butchers these people for years. They failed to remove him until the people on the ground one day rise and they end up putting him in the back of a truck and they parade him through the capital city as they go. They take him to a detention center. So the responsibility to protect is there, but the global governance system is the one that's failing the nationals of the states that are being affected. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Angela Dube. We will go to the next person. I think it was yes. You can please unmute your mic and ask a question.
Okay. Am I audible enough? Okay.
Yes.
Yes, my name is Dr. Emily. Yes. I have a question for Dr. Felix Dube. If you would kindly answer me, does Taiwan satisfy the definition of a state in international law? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Doc. Yes. No, thank you very much, Doc.
So, if we have to ask ourselves, does Taiwan satisfy the definition of a state in international law? I think it does, and the reason being, the Montevideo Convention on the Rights and Duties of States has got this definition that tells us what a state has to have in order for it to qualify as a state in international. And I think the first element will be, does it have a population? Yes, Taiwan has got a definite population, millions of people, so it is a state. Number two, does it have a defined territory? Yes, they do. We know the Taiwan Strait. We know where the place is. And number three, does it have an effective government in place? I think they're being governed properly. There is no failure of government, so there is effective leadership. And the other one will be the ability to enter into diplomatic relations. And I think they do. So even though China says this is our territory, but I think they satisfy all the definitions or all the definitional elements of a state in international law. But the next question that we may want to then ask, under what conditions can a state be allowed to take away the statehood of another state? I don't think there is a lawful way to do it, because the people have got sovereignty, they've got self-determination. So anybody who tries to take it away, to take state away from another country, then that is actually acting in an aggressive manner, and that is not permitted in international. So yes, Taiwan satisfies the definition of a state in international. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Felix, for your answer. We will now go to Advocate Migua.
Good morning. I've got both questions and comments, perhaps. The first one I'd like to, I don't want to direct my questions to anybody. I'll just share a couple of thoughts. Dr. Felix, so what if Taiwan is the requirements of the state? So what? And what thereafter, in the face of the national interest of China? Because now we're trying to solve an ambiguity, but ourselves and our language is equally ambiguous. For example, we talk about a country threatening another country within the context of what we're talking about. For me, self-defeating exercise, in the sense that the current position, at least, is that China and Taiwan remains one. And it is the interest of then the Republic of China, from my perspective, that it remains one. And that anybody that would want to threaten the unity of that would be met with force, including military force. The question becomes, can one show force in relation to himself? For example, if we say China and Taiwan are one, does the military drills that China has just conducted imply a show of force, as you put it? And that, to me, I cannot see South Africa, for example, conducting military drills in Cape Town be seen as a show of force in and of itself in relation to one of its islands, for example. For as long as the positions, the status quo remain that this is a unitary or it's one people, there might be different governance structures and whatever. Case in point, we hear often talks in South Africa about the desire of a certain province in the Republic that would want to be independent, to declare its own, exercise its own self-determination. But it remains a desire up until it's effective. And perhaps, even when that day comes, the Republic will not sit back and smile and accept. The other thing that, so I would have loved to hear more about what is behind the need for self-determination of Taiwan, more than anything else. But also I'd be very curious to know about the national interest question, because any country whose national interests are threatened will even resort to the use of force. And that is allowed within whatever space, depending on who you ask, including the situation, for example, the typical example that's happening with Russia, Donetsk, and Luhansk. Similar issues. Yes, regions that seemingly want self-determination, Ukraine is against. The US is supporting Ukraine against these regions that want self-determination. And then there's Russia on the other side recognizing them. And then the truth of the matter is that the international dynamic, the muscle remains supreme. And unfortunately, up until these issues are dealt with properly, we cannot now have emotive conversations. We must then look at, is law, for example, even if we want to classify and determine really the status of Taiwan, is law really a solution within the context of what we're talking about? Then we've got the Taiwan Relations Act that the US passed, I think 1979, and that remains clearly in its preamble, determines the interest of America in relation to Taiwan, the agriculture, space, and many other issues there. And they would be interested to interfere there. And that is the interference. Why is it that the US is not told to stay away from the affairs of the Chinese people as a whole, that they, Taiwan and China, sort it out diplomatically? And there is this so-called, whoever it is, America, that we must now worry about, as Zororo said, to say that this will be now the third world war, superpower versus superpower. US must stay away from the Chinese issues, and the people must come together, diplomatically or whatever, and discuss those issues. Again, show of force is when there are military operations that are being conducted. Obviously, the idea is to show to the other one, stop you, whatever you are doing, or else. Man. But in relation to the military drill, it's just me, as a nation, in my own territory, exercising my capabilities so that I can demonstrate to whoever a third party that wants to intervene in domestic affairs of that country that I will deal with you should you come. And from my perspective, in terms of the current status of Taiwan, I do not see that we can say that a country forming military drills in its own space is problematic. Safe to say, there will always be ideological differences. For example, is this a war between communism and democracy, playing itself in international affairs? In terms of ideological differences between, let's say, Taiwan and China, and then how the US and other players that want to stay there are then trying to interfere and influence the narrative around. Perhaps that's why we are also confused about the language that we are using. And that's the challenges that I had. But I dare say in conclusion, any other country, including South Africa, when its territory is threatened by whoever it is, that's a third party, will be met with force without acknowledgement. And unfortunately, this time, America knows the stakes are high, the petrodollar is going down, then the geopolitical influence is going down, and unfortunately, the dog has to kick harder, or the horse has to kick harder because they are going down. And unfortunately, there's nothing they can do to China militarily with its other partners. Those are just comments, and perhaps we could reflect the entire panel on some of those issues. Sovereignty remains sovereignty. And currently, I find that we are self-defeating because we are not providing a solution, because we are self-ambiguous in terms of the language that we are using to put down these issues.
Thank you very much, Advocate. Thank you very much. I think, yes, Doc, we will give you the opportunity to reflect on the comments. I think let's just take another question. Mr. Mabala, yes, we'll come back to you. Thank you. Mr. Gai, maybe we should look at Mabala.
Good morning to everyone. I should like to start with an anecdote by Deng Xiaoping, the former Chinese leader. Tao Guang Yang Wei. Bide your time till you achieve what you want. This anecdote tells us very well that the Taiwanese and the Chinese, much as they are of same language, culture, and race, they are simply divided by ideology, and ideology that has been transferred to them by foreign forces. There is a one China policy recognized even by the United States, and then at the same time there is what we call a strategic ambiguity. What is all that if it is not self-defeating? It tells us that there is no clear direction of where Taiwan lies, but only of mainland China. Furthermore, there is one question that has been asked by one of our panelists here, and it is that Africa is affected by this. How are we affected? I doubt the Taiwanese would be bothered by a civil war in Sudan. Why should we be affected by what happens in Taiwan? They say globalization. I say isolationism. The Taiwanese have isolated themselves in a Western ideology, not even bothered at all by what happens here besides looking for recognition. They only have one ally in Africa, and that's it. That is the Kingdom of Eswatini, a small landlocked country. Just as small as they are, it's a population of 23 million people, Taiwan, opposed to a population of 1.3 billion people with mainland China. A GDP of $18 trillion, for that matter. Are we to sacrifice that kind of cooperation and economic engagement for a mere Taiwan? I doubt it. I would like to ask Mr. Felix should we as South Africans be bothered by the very fact that Taiwan is a cheap manufacturer? Or should we be bothered by the fact that here is a superpower challenging the norms of the so-called race-based order, a race-based order that benefits the United States? We are being very liberal and romantic about this Taiwanian issue here. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Kariming, for the question. Before we go to Mabala and Doc, I'm just going to give an opportunity to Dr. Felix to respond to the two, and then after we will go to our colleagues online in that chronological order, and then we'll come back to the physical attendees to ask the question. Dr. Felix, I think just come and answer the two before we proceed to the rest. Thank you.
Thank you, Program Speaker, Program Director, apologies. So the question that has been asked is if China wants to invade Taiwan and so what? And I think that the answer to that is bigger than we think. And the reason for that lies in the principle of self-determination. People have a right to master their own destiny. Nobody has got a right to decide for them how they want to live. If the people of Taiwan want to join China, and they say, yes, we want to join China, they do a referendum, they say, yes, we want to join China, then let them do it. But if they say, we don't want to join China, China has no right in international law, no legal loophole whatsoever to then go and invade Taiwan. The reason being, when they are doing those military drills, they are not using toys. They are using serious military hardware. And those are things that can inflict a lot of devastation and suffering on human beings. And we don't want that. So, and if we are to say, okay, this thing is happening in Taiwan, forget about it. We don't want to be involved. The next thing, they are coming for you. And there will be nobody who is going to say, but South Africa has got a right to self-determination. The next moment, they're going to go to Congo because they want those minerals there. Right? You won't have phone in your pocket if they don't have those minerals there. So they're going to come for those people again. And who is going to speak to them? You understand? So it's about the precedents that aggression creates in international. And this is not just a drill. You can't tell me that you can bring so much military hardware and say it's just a drill. No, it's a show of force to say we can actually finish you off. And that is the thing that we're against, the issues of aggression international. And then the other question was, so how are we affected about what is happening in Taiwan? And I've already answered the question that you won't have the phone in your pocket if those chip manufacturers were not today in Taiwan. So you won't be able to communicate with your grandmother in the village because you don't have a phone. That fancy car of yours that has got all those self-driving features and all those, it runs on a chip that is manufactured in Taiwan. You understand? So everything that we have, the network trust, everything depends on those chips. And I believe that we don't have to take a position and say we're going to support this country. Rather, we need to be guided by principles of international law. And of course, some will say, no, we're being liberal and romantic. I know we're all affected by romanticism. I understand that. But we have to go down to principle and say, what is best for the world? Do we want the world to be in war, or we prefer the world to be in peace? And peace costs us nothing. And I think we should go with that. And if there was going to be conflict today, it's actually Africa that is going to suffer more than everybody. It's going to be a new suffering. We won't be able to do anything. Understand? Because our economies are interconnected. The Chinese are going there because they want that industry of the chip manufacturing. They want to actually monopolize it and control it. And who knows what they're going to do. So you need checks and balances in international law. You can't justify aggression, not even under any circumstances. That's just my view.
Thank you very much, Dr. Felix Dube. I think quickly before I move online, I would just request Prof. me to also reflect a bit. Thank you, Prof.
Thank you, Sipo. Very interesting contributions from the floor. Romanticism. I always use that word when I debunk Western pedagogy, and I accuse them of this Eurocentric romanticism. And today it's being used in this form. Let me perhaps address myself to the issue of why we should concern ourselves as Africans. We don't eat ideology, no matter how much we love it. No matter how much the BRICS setup makes us lean more towards Russia, towards China, no matter how much you can romanticize the role of the BRICS countries during apartheid and the struggle for freedom, we cannot do what some of our partners can do. As Africans, we have this tendency to just run with ideology and not with the reality on the ground. Can we manufacture certain things? We have the minerals. We're the richest continent on the globe. We suffer from what is called the resource curse. We have all the resources, but we can't, add value to them and produce something for the market. We tend to import many things. We rely so much on imports that when Russia and Ukraine fought, suddenly issues around bread, rice were a problem. And those of us who are gluten intolerant was even worse, because now even those alternatives were even more expensive than they were before. That is the story of Africa. So when we look towards the East and we think that we should align with one side or the other, we need to have that reality in mind. Advocate Mopa, you touched on the issue of can I really be aggressive against myself? In other words, can China be aggressive against itself if Taiwan is a mere province of China? Good question to pose. However, you need to also reflect on the fact that international law recognizes self-determination of peoples. If a people come together and they say, on account of our common beliefs, on account of our race, on account of our religion, on account of whatever it is that determines them, sets them apart, we want to be governed this way and not that way. Aggression, which would move against the ethos of the ICC statute, which South Africa is a party to, and which South Africa would have to ensure that it is respected, because we are a member of the ICC statute, the Rome statute. And if any state aggresses against another, or perhaps the argument could be it's not a state, but there are 13 states that recognize that particular entity. So, at the end of the day, we can argue one way or the other whether this is aggression or not. But the fact that it goes against the Rome statute that South Africa is bound to observe means that we cannot approach it callous as we would any other issue. If you look at the issue, it's not just a Taiwanese issue. Look at Africa. We have Somalia and Somaliland, similar issue. The British and the Italians come, one colonizes the one side, the other colonizes the other side. They briefly convince these guys that we are the same people, we speak the same language, come together from one country. But a few days after that, they realize, no, this is one word, we're not one people. We want to be Somaliland, separate, as we were before you came here to colonize us. That is refused. To this day, Somalia, Mogadishu, tell you that Somaliland, Hargeisa, is nothing else but a province. Now and again, they'll throw in Puntland, which will also claim its own sovereignty, just to confuse the situation. Those are the issues that we're dealing with. Western Sahara and Morocco, Palestine, and the apartheid state of Israel. We are dealing with those issues because there are people who have come together and they've said we are autonomous, we want to self-determine ourselves, we want to determine how we are governed, we want to determine our future. We want to form ourselves into an entity which should be recognized as a state. We tick all the boxes in the Montevideo Convention. We tick all the boxes in customary international law. We are, for all intents and purposes, a state. But this is being denied because apparently it does not favor one of the superpowers in the world. This, you talk about national interest, which is not just national security, right? Which is also economic security. We saw this playing itself out when Trump was still the president of the US. Somehow clearly he might not be coming. But when he was the president of the US, we saw it playing itself out between the US and China. China arrests an executive from the US. The US retaliates by arresting Miss Meng of Huawei while she is transiting in Canada. It's a trade war. It's a show of force. Each country saying we can show force. We're going to arrest your high-ranking executive to show that we can mess up your people, we can mess up your economy. we're going to blacklist all Huawei products in the US. So states do that. And when they do that, us as Africans, we must ask ourselves, where do we fit? The things that are used, or the materials that are used to manufacture Huawei, the phone, and the iPhone from America, are taken from DRC in Africa. They are done there by small boys who are being abused in mines that are not regulated, run and funded by Western corporations which are corrupt, which will never be prosecuted, despite 50 billion leaving the African continent on an annual basis, illicitly, benefiting Western companies. We cannot sit back as Africans and say, it's not our war. It is our war. Our children are in the mines in the Congo. You know, they're dying there, illegal mines, not equipped, because they're taking materials and elements required for the manufacture of the iPhone, the manufacture of Huawei, which is a Chinese product and a Western product from the US. We sit in the middle of this war. Thank you very much.
No, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Professor Dube. We will now go to our guests online who have also have had their share of asking a question. We had a question from yeah, I'm just going to read the question from Tato. It was Tato, I think Tato Masatsi. Okay, the question from Tato reads as follows. I would like to ask if the ripple effects of the tensions between Taiwan and China are already being felt regionally in SADC, and whether there is a threat of breach by either party in agreements and treaties to which SADC countries are a party to. This question goes further to say, what are the consequences of this? It goes on to add that I imagine perhaps it would affect immigration and the social or humanitarian responsibilities that SADC countries would have to bear, maybe also on trade routes and commodities. That is his question. And then we also have another question from Zaluba. And then it reads as follows. Given that South Africa's position within BRICS, as well as commitment to MTSF priority of ensuring a safer Africa in a better world, how are the issues of national interest and territorial integrity impacted by these exercises? How is this scenario different from the one of Ukraine and Russia, and what should be South Africa's response if these are similar? If different, in what sense, and what should South Africa's posture be? So this is a question from Zanuba. I don't know, we should take two questions and then reply, and then two questions and then reply. Two questions simultaneously and then a reply. Dr. Felix? And then Dube will come and I'll just, yes.
Thank you so much. I think most of these issues have been indirectly addressed, but just to recap, I'm of the view that we cannot justifiably compare the conflict in Ukraine and this one in Taiwan. The reason being that there is already an armed conflict. I don't know whether we should call it, but I think it's an international armed conflict in Ukraine right now. And we don't currently have that in Ukraine. And the circumstances surrounding that, I think they're different because the Russians actually acknowledge the sovereignty of Ukraine as a nation. They do acknowledge it, and they are saying that they want to finish it off. But the Chinese, on the other hand, they're actually not acknowledging the sovereignty of the people of Taiwan. So these are a bit different conflicts, but as to whether we're beginning to feel the ripple effects, I think we've already felt them from the Russian war. But concerning the Taiwanese war, what we're going to have a gradual feel of this thing. As things go, we may find that there's going to be a massive investment pull out from Taiwan as a result of these threats. Nobody wants to put their money in a war zone. So as that happens, then you might see a constraint in their manufacturing capacity and their supply systems, and then you may certainly wonder why is your phone now suddenly more expensive. You're going to wonder why the parts for your vehicle are more expensive, why your routers are more expensive. So you're going to see that thing gradually seeping in. But then as to what posture should we take, I think we should take a principled posture. The reason being we're also equally exposed to aggression in Africa. As I've already said, what stops them from coming to Africa to take what they want by force? Because the Chinese are not here in Africa because they are benevolent, because they are generous beings. They are here to make money. And they are spending so much in buying all these minerals and goods from Africa. So what prevents them from coming to take them by force after they've taken over Taiwan? So there's a question that I think we should really ask. And as I already said, we don't want a world at war. We already have enough problems in the world than another armed conflict.
Thank you very much. We will now go to our other guests online. I see there's been a hand from Mabunda Tumisani. Mr. Tumisani, you can just unmute and ask your question. We can hear you.
Thank you, Program Director. I just want to try to be practical. My question is not directed at a particular speaker. Anyone can answer that. I'm Dr. Mabunda at the College of Law at UNISA. Let me be practical. You see your neighbor abusing his spouse. And you know that if you get involved in their domestic affairs, you are most likely to end up in a bad situation. Now the question, what do you do? Secondly, how will we as Africa ensure that those countries that we are discussing in this session, which is China and Taiwan, take our advices or concerns seriously? Moreover, here in Africa, we had a situation in Zim where our country was expressing the quiet diplomacy stance. I don't know if that is not double standards. Lastly, I heard some speakers speaking about the ripple effects of the Russia-Ukraine war. For example, that we were struggling to get manure. We were relying on another country to provide us with manure. I don't know if we take ourselves seriously, if we cannot manufacture manure locally. We have to manufacture manure so that the Ukraine-China war don't have an effect on us. So I hope those issues can be addressed by us here. And I'm not saying we shouldn't get involved in other international arena because we want to be relevant, but there are simple things that we know that we can do very little to change the situation. Thank you, Program Director.
Dr. Mabunda, thank you very much for that well-penned question. I'm just going to call our panelists to come and respond to same. I'll first start with Professor Angela Dube. Prof.
Thank you, Program Director. Doc, your questions are very, very complex. And what makes them complex is you use a very volatile example, an analogy of an abused spouse. And there you want to really stay clear of that arena because tomorrow you will be labeled an interferer in that relationship, even though one was pleading when you were interfering. But once they stop pleading, tomorrow you'll be called an interferer, and people will be calling for you to be cancelled. Cancel culture will be upon you. It's a very difficult one to say, but in this case, fortunately, we are not just neighbors without obligations. We are neighbors with obligations, and those are to be found in the governance structure of international relations, of the global governance structure. to be found in international law. The responsibility to protect calls upon the state to lend a hand, or the international community, or members thereof, to lend a hand where they can see that this other state manifestly can't protect its own population. Or if it can, but it needs more power, more assistance, then the neighbor can move in and assist. So if we are to ensure that all our actions are based on principles, they're based on rules, the rules of the multilateral system, instead of basing everything that we have on romanticism with the past, we will surely begin to see movement in that regard. You also made reference to the issue of quiet diplomacy and how it has messed up the SADC region in the past. You're right to note this, and I don't think we can afford quiet diplomacy, and I don't think South Africa is prepared for quiet diplomacy in this particular instance. And I think South Africa is actually prepared for very loud diplomacy, leaning towards China, given the BRICS, and given the fact that South Africa has diplomatic relations with China and not with Taiwan. Whether that will bode well for Africa or bode well for South Africa, it remains to be seen. You also talked about the economic effect of these things, including the fact that somebody mentioned that at some point we couldn't get manure. We need to stop the romanticism as Africans. If we say we don't need China, if we say we don't need Taiwan, if we say we don't need Ukraine, if we say we don't need Russia, how are we going to supply what these entities were supplying before we get to the point where we say we don't need them? President Putin wants to visit South Africa, and he just might as well do, just as al-Bashir did. And there is absolutely nothing we can do as a republic to stop him from coming and going. Because coming is one thing, but him exiting the republic is another. We cannot hinder him, even though we have obligations under the Rome statutes. We will not even attempt to place him under arrest. We can't even give him the cuffs and say, cuff yourself. He will just take off and leave South Africa without a problem. Why? Because we are so indebted to Russia. We are both romantically connected to Russia and economically connected to Russia. And we need to start removing that mental curtain from our heads when we're dealing with international relations in this particular manner. I know I'm probably waffling and not even answering the question, but for us to actually remedy the effects, the economic effects of these fallouts between superpowers, South Africa needs to start taking its economy serious. It starts with simple thing of fighting corruption. It starts with the simple thing of reinstilling in preschool children all the way to grade 12, all the way to university, how to be productive. It starts with us telling people that a grant is not something you can always look forward to. Think beyond that. Yes, you've got a grant now. What did you do with the grant? It starts with us stopping from romanticizing poverty and saying, but people are poor. They're doing this because they are poor. It starts with us instilling responsibility, turning the economy around, and the government helping those entrepreneurs who need to start businesses and create employment, rather than giving people grants, a system to become employers, a system to create employment. That's the economic driver. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Angelo Dube. We have two questions from online colleagues. One is a new question and the other is a follow-up question. But I think we just have to answer the one that is new and then we'll come to the follow-up before to go to our waiting. I see there are new hands also from our physical guests. So I'm just going to go through our last question online before we come to the follow-up that we will read later. The question goes as follows. Seems like our speakers have already have a side. But Taiwan, like Britain and Tibet, are Chinese islands. Remember that even Hong Kong was independent and is now being handed over back to China. Keeping Taiwan independent is like supporting the efforts of colonialism, which are still exploiting our economy. Furthermore, Taiwan was given consent by colonizers such as UK and US to stay independent from China, and is only recognized as a country by 13 states. This Taiwan, listen to this. This Taiwan is just a military island for US to deal with its insecurities over the rise of a powerful China. If the US military has let me continue, please. If the US military has bases surrounding China and South Korea, Japan, and many other islands in the South China, what role do we as South Africans have, since the United Nations is a mockery controlled by veto powers and the US do as it wishes? Yes, I think we can get before. It's a follow-up question, the other one. It's a follow-up question from Taki. He already asked, he was answered, he's making a follow-up. I think I could just deal with the follow-up question. And then we can
Ask the follow-up question.
Yeah. He asked, considering that the Russian, Ukraine, and US and NATO involvement in Ukraine was interpreted by Russia as a threat to Russian sovereignty, Russian response was to cut off fuel supply pipelines to Europe, thus triggering an enemy crisis for countries like Germany. The defense pact between US, the UK, and Australia has angered China and has been seen by China as a threat to Chinese sovereignty. How vulnerable are SADC countries to being subjected to similar treatment should SADC try to dissuade China from continuing with its activities? Would it be prudent to approach China under these circumstances? Thank you very much to our colleagues online. They are going to be responded shortly by the panelists. Thank you.
Thank you, Program Director. I love the language used here. It's very, very colorful and flowery, and it brings the issues to the fore succinctly. The first question about colonialism and yes, being a continuation of colonialism. We need to use the same glasses, wear the same glasses when we look at Africa, to realize that we are still dealing with, indeed, the ravages of colonialism. When Africa became independent, or didn't become independent, when many states regained their independence, because they were once independent before they were colonized, and they regained that independence in the 60s. One of the things they did was to simply sit down and say, as you possessed, so it shall be. And they put that into one of the founding instruments of the continental body. That was to say, whatever boundaries were there at independence, they will continue to be there, you will not disturb, which is why Lesotho was claiming free states, KZN, Umaran, just the other day. We are still running Africa using African borders not drawn by us. You can have an uncle on the one side of a fence and another uncle on the other side of a fence, one homestead bisected in the middle by a colonial border, and that is Africa. So when you look at the Taiwanese-Chinese issue and put it in the frame of colonialism, just know that that is what's happening globally. Even Africa can be accused of that. What we call South Africa today, Lesotho says it's its land. Swaziland says that's my land. I am sure Botswana also claims some part of South Africa. So the colonial history and the colonial character that we carry cannot just be used to analyze the Taiwanese situation only. It is everywhere. The fact that Taiwan might have been given or assisted to stand alone by a colonial master does not take away from the fact that by today's laws and regulations, the people of the territory have spoken, and that is called self-determination in international law. They have determined their political governance, they've determined the direction they wish to go, and that cannot, again under the protection of international law, be disregarded simply because of our romantic connection with the past. Still, the rules must be followed. The rule of law exist in the global scale? That will be my answer to the first question. The second question dealt with quite a number of issues about how vulnerable is SADC to be subjected to these cutoffs, these economic cutoffs. Obviously, we know that cutoffs can come in this way. It can come because you align with the wrong party. And then the more powerful party who's been supplying you says, I'm cutting you off. Or it could come because the whole system disintegrates. You know, supply and demand. Demand will now overtake supply. And obviously, those territories will begin to prioritize their own. And not an African sitting at the tip of Africa somewhere with so much gold and so much diamond, but exporting it raw as it is to Europe. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Dube. We will now go to our yes, Mr. I recognize you, but we will go to, I think, Dr. D and Dr. Mawala to ask their questions. I think we'll start with you, Doc. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, and thank you so much for our speakers for engaging with us on this very sensitive topic. I think from where I'm sitting, the international law has created a monster. And I say this because if we look at the ICJ statute, already it was othering others, thereby starting a trend. Because if you look at the sources of international law, for example, it says there are treaties, there are customs, but it also says there are general principles of law recognized by civilized nations. Now the question is, looking at the year in which this instrument was concluded, in the 1945, who were they referring to when they say civilized? Already they were starting this trend. Once again, you look at the Montevideo Convention, same thing. Those criteria for statehood, they are also problematic because once again, they were othering others, and in that, Africa was excluded, Asia was excluded because we were not civilized at that particular period. So I think we need to recognize that the international law as it is right now should be overhauled because it's creating all these problems. And if we are to deal with the issue, we need to start with the law that exists at the international stage so that all these conflicts can stop. Because if we do not recognize that, trust me, a few months from now, we're going to have another conflict because many territories are being claimed, even though they existed. And I'm going to give, as an example, the province in KwaZulu-Natal. You have pre-colonial state, and you have Shaka Zulu now applying the criteria in the Montevideo Convention. It says there must be a permanent government. Was there a permanent government? Yes. Shaka Zulu knew who he was governing, and therefore there was that criteria being met. Was there a defined territory? Yes. It was known that that province belonged to the Zulu people. And I'm going to run quickly with this. And the power, was it centralized? Yes. There was a king who was controlling everything within that territory. Did it have capacity to enter into relations? Once again, yes. It was entering, it had diplomatic relations with other kingdoms. And sometimes when there was war, they would even say, if your daughter marry my son, the war will cease. So those were the international relations and diplomatic relations that existed with other states. But then you sit in 2023, and you are still trying to fight for a territory without understanding that that particular territory does meet the requirements for statehood. So for me, the Article 38 of the ICJ and the Monvete, they are actually redundant, and I'm going to leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Msongo. We will now go to take 2 questions per time. Mr. Mabala, please come in.
No, thank you. The problem is that Prof answered my question with one question. It was about so many things.
All right, I think we will.
If I may still.
Yes, Mr. Bayi, I recognize you. I think him and then you, advocates. Tajib, I think your hand was up. You may shoot here. Yes, please.
Good afternoon. My name is Tawzi Kali, and my question is straight up for Professor Dube. It is regarding the education, regarding South Africa should be independent in manufacturing its own products, chips as well. But my question to you is, how can South Africa manufacture or learn how to manufacture these chips with a educational curriculum that was established around about the time. So the educational system, the curriculum has not been developed as to the modern world. So how can South Africa adapt and develop its technology to manufacture and use its own resources? As you mentioned, we have a condition which is called the minerals curse. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Just before I allow the panel to answer your questions, I just wish you announce, colleagues, that we are running behind schedule. So you're just going to take the last 2 hands from Advocate and Mr. Musekwa and our guest online. Oh, yes, including you, my apologies. Yes, so this will be the last round because we are really running behind schedule. So we do not want to, encroach into other spaces that could be done. So, panelists, Professor and Dr. Dube, I think we may answer the questions posed by the floor. Thank you. To your left, right. Yeah, I think I'm going to give you an opportunity to come in. Yes, yeah.
Maybe follow up on the question first.
No problem.
You'll recall that I raised 2 issues. But I want to phrase it differently and say, at what point do we consider South African foreign policy and weigh it against national interests, whose definition is still to be found? I have an advantage of being in military, and I'm asking this from the angle of saying, at what point do we deal with these issues as academics? And the reason I was taking, I didn't want to take the Sudan one, I wanted to take this one, the Ukraine. You take this one. And it saddens at this day and age that we need to be talking about fertilizer and chips. But for all I care, Africa is having the resources and even the rare earth metals from which all those chips come from. The question that we need to deal with is what we are saying. Are we taking ourselves as Africans seriously? We have engineers. We have expertise in extractive industries. At what point are we going to stop with iPhones and decide that we are going to have 94 as Africans? Because if we don't do that, that is why we have serious threats within the cyberspace, within airspace. Because whatever we have belongs somewhere else. But the ingredients are coming from Africa. So my point is, what is South Africa's foreign policy? And what are our national interests? And as we're speaking, are we speaking as Africa or as South Africa? Because for the way I see it, take for example the free trade agreement. Nigeria is putting its own position. Kenya is putting
beneficiation position within it as a country.
No, thank you very much. We'll go in that order. Advocate and then Mr. Mseko.
Perhaps just a few thoughts. For me, and this is just my final comments, I see the US as an antagonist interfering in a place it should not even be getting involved in. And seemingly, I see also an opportunity for us as the African continent to consolidate our efforts and to call upon the entire globe to say, let us reform the UN and the UN Security Council. Let us correct some of the issues, because it's been too long since we revisited a lot of the guiding documents, and I think it's about time that we do so. And then lastly now, I would just I like simplicity, and so far I'm seemingly confused whether the panel accepts in simple English that Taiwan and China are one country. Is this, I just want a simple yes or no answer, because so far we continue what I articulated, which was avoided by the doctor to answer. To say we are talking about one country threatening another country in the context of Taiwan. And I find that to be an ambiguity, and I thought we were solving an ambiguity, but now it seems we are doing so by being ambiguous ourselves. I need clarity on that simple question.
Okay, thank you very much for being allowed this opportunity to interact again. These conversations are getting very much interested, so one can't be left behind, but I must also cause a personal controversy inside the house. But from what I have heard and what I have observed, my senior advocate Mwegwa has been in support fundamentally with the demonstrations that have been taking place and the military drills that have been taking place. He seems to be a very huge fan of such. But we must be able to ask Advocate Mwegwa whether in his support has he considered the lives of innocent people that are at stake during those military terrorist activities that are happening in Taiwan by China. Secondly, should we allow those military drills to continue, demonstrations as he described them? Should we allow the demonstrations to continue? Who is to be held accountable for such international crimes? It can be because we have just described them as military drills. The question that will now go to the panel is which type of an international crime has been committed in Taiwan by China? Is it, should we describe it as mass atrocities, crimes against humanity, genocide, war crimes, or any type of an international crime? So that would be my question. And should it be described as such? This is to the panelists. Should it be described as an international crime and as one of the crimes that I mentioned? Which particular forum would be appropriate to hold who accountable for which crime? Thank you so much.
Yo, there's so many something else. Thank you, Mr. Mseko, and all the others who posed questions. It's making the seminar interactive in a very, very big way. Let me try and respond. Dr. Mseko raised the issue of the need to transform the multilateral system, the need to transform the systems of the UN, and how the ICJ statute on its own, when it came about, referred to other nations as uncivilized. And that's a legacy we carry to this day. I can only agree with you that the methods we're using to determine what a state is might even be a continuation of a Eurocentric and biased view of what a state looks like. And you will know personally because you were there when we were dealing with a particular matter at a conference that had to do with that, and when we were arguing with We had states in Africa, and we were told states in the Westphalian sense. So there's no Westphalian sense, it was just a state. Because when we were states, in Westphalia they were still living in caves. They were still killing each other, butchering each other. And yet in 1940 something, when they made the ICJ statute, they referred to themselves as civilized, and others as not civilized. So that's a very important point. There was a question on South Africa's ability to manufacture. How can we handle that if the curriculum is still so outdated? That's a very fundamental observation. And I would agree with you there that until we transform our education system, transform it to such an extent that if people come and they find a red robot, traffic lights, they will know to stop. Not to run in front of your car and bang your bonnet and say, "What's wrong with you? Can't you see I'm crossing?" And that time, it's red for him. It's because we have dropped the ball as a society. We dropped the ball on little things, the bigger things are going to fall like dominoes. We need to reform our education system. We need to make sure that we train people who are going to be ingenious, who are going to be creative and manufacture all these things that we look to the West and the East for. We need to manufacture them in Africa instead of always taking our diamonds and gold and oil out of this continent. So I agree with you, but we ask, how can we manage that? We need what is called political will. Those in power must will it. And then those who are led by those in power must hold those in power accountable. As long as we vote for the same fella who promises us 100,000 jobs and can't even show us one job, and every year we vote for him, we have ourselves to blame. So we reconfigure the education system, reconfigure the voting patterns, we hold people accountable, we create jobs by creating entrepreneurs, we stop giving people grants. It doesn't take this country anywhere. At what point do we consider as a foreign policy, coming to your question, to decide our own? Look, you asked if this is a beneficiation position that we're taking as a continent. One might conclude so. I'll tell you what. I've been to the African Union headquarters once. I was still using Huawei by then. I'm sure it's hacked in China somewhere. Why? Because that building was not funded by Africans. That building was funded by the Chinese who came with their Chinese workers to build it. If you ask me to come and build your building, and I'm a superpower like that, honestly, every phone that comes in 100-meter radius will be banned. Because you've given me a free reign to build a building from scratch and put in everything that I want to put in there, to listen to every conversation that every African has. And I'm a step ahead, and I can always neutralize whatever Africa is doing. We are taking this poverty mentality too far as Africans. We are romanticizing poverty. When people loot, you stand up and you say, but they're poor. When Thabo Bester and Dr. Maputumana do whatever they did, but she's beautiful. It's a nonsensical African approach. We always want to justify delinquent behavior. Poverty is number one. We romanticize poverty a lot. A lot. When people are pulling carts full of plastic and glass, blocking highways, becoming a danger to themselves and to drivers of the highways, what's our response? But they are poor. When people move into other people's houses to steal and kill and rape and pillage, our response is, but they are poor. Africa is an enemy to itself. Yes. That is why we look towards the beneficiation position. We look towards what does the West give us? What does Russia give us? What does China give us? And we want to align with that. We need, was it Bob Marley who said, emancipate yourself from mental slavery? Africa is still in shackles, in the head. We need to emancipate ourselves from that mental slavery. Only then can we be meaningful players in the global field. Look at addressing Advocate Moka's question on the UN reforms. We've been calling for UN reforms, you're correct. We've been calling for them, they're necessary, they need to come. But sometimes I ask myself the question, how many times has South Africa served on the UN Security Council as part of the non-permanent members of the Security Council? A number of times. When it came time for them to vote against the brutality in Miami, former Burma, South Africa voted the other way. A country that likes to claim we have the best constitution in the world, and it's not even the best. It can't even give people land that was stolen from them. But we claim it's the best. And when it comes to us sitting at a place where it matters, where our vote matters, we look at China, we look at Russia, we follow Big Brother. We don't question. Exactly. So there are so many instances that one can list. So reforming the UN will require the African to reform his mind. The African is still colonized, if not by the US and the UK or France, by the East, China or Russia. That is the unfortunate position of the African. Msempo, you asked about certain happenings in Taiwan and how those could be handled. Fortunately for now, it's just thrills. It's just, F-16s and F-35s, somersaulting in the air, and aircraft carriers doing their thing on the waters. But if there was to be actual physical harm on the ground, then of course, whether China is party to the Rome Statute or not, will be neither here nor there. You would expect South Africa, which claims you have the best constitution, to use that best constitution to hold Chinese perpetrators accountable when they set foot on South African soil. But as we saw from al-Bashir, as we will see from President Putin, that is also the pie in the sky. It might not necessarily happen. But for now, what has happened is aggression against a particular people. Whether those people are a state or not, it is aggressive behavior. And if international law was what it claims to be, perhaps we're going to see some movement in that way. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Dube. We will now go to our guest online who also have a question. We have another one from Buluso, which is rather domestic. He asked, the people of Western Cape want the Cape independence. Must we submit to that? He asked. And then we have another question from Mr. David. He asked, how actionable are the outcomes of these deliberations? He goes on to ask, are we morally or legally concerned with Taiwan merely on account of economic implications for Africa, in such a way that other groups of people agitating for self-determination, especially in Africa, are not prioritized for similar seminars? And then we have a last question from Mr. Chenga. He says, these situations of Taiwan and also Ukraine points to poor world governance. The United Nations seems to be ineffective in maintaining world order. The composition of the UN should be inclusive and not only comprise superpowers that are glaringly fear each other. He says, I think that the situation could be different if continents were equally represented in the body, irrespective of their economic status and all whims of the superpowers. He ends by saying, I do not support rotation. So these are our last round of questions, and we're just going to open to the question was not answered. A simple one. Yeah, I think one of our guests, Advocate Mekua, says his question has not been answered. He asked a very simple question. He said, are we going to just simply conclude that Taiwan belongs to China? Is Taiwan belongs to China? That's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Program Director. Let me try and respond to Advocate Mekua quickly. If I was a politician, knowing I needed to sing for my supper, and I knew where my supper came from, I would have given you a straightforward answer. However, I'm an academic. I will give as I have given the scenario, and you will have to extrapolate the position from that scenario. The politician will simply look towards the South African foreign policy and tell you about the one China policy. I am not a politician. I will, however, paint the picture to you that a people, however they came to be, decided to use international law guarantees and enjoyments that they have to call themselves the island of Taiwan, to be self-determinant, to determine their own future. And that every discussion around this, whether we're asking ourselves, is this a province? Are we going to follow China's claim that this is a province, or follow Taiwan's claim that no, we are not a province, we're a state, we're the president, we're the government, with international relations, we have a population and territory? I will therefore not answer that question because I'm not a politician. But if I was a politician, I would have given you an answer. It wouldn't be my personal answer, it would be an answer of the source that gives me my supper after I've sung my supper. So, as I stand here, I will give you an international law answer to say that there are conflicting claims on the territory. The one has, over years, persistently held itself out as a state. It has had 13 out of the 190-something states across the world recognize it. Even though in Africa only one remains, the rest are elsewhere. Small states, you might say. Small island states with 10,000 people. But international law of sovereign equality says all states are equal. Whether you have 1 billion people in your population or you have 5,000, are a state. That's the beauty of international law. Now, to the questions online, someone raised the issue of the Cape, the Western Cape. The difference with the Western Cape situation is that nobody there has the guts to execute a referendum. Let's hear what the people of the Western Cape are saying. Are the people of the Western Cape the ones who want secession, who want to become a state? All we've had is a bunch of people going around claiming that they represent everybody in the Western Cape. I've lived in the Western Cape for many years. I've contributed to the economy of the Western Cape. I would never have supported it departing from South Africa. So unless these people can show us that the Western Cape people have spoken to a referendum, and it does not end there, we might see them to have a referendum in South Africa, whether we let them go or not. And then there was a question around us prioritizing this particular issue. I want to put this in proper context. This is the first of our 3-part series this year on mainstreaming military law and criminal justice. We started with a topical issue because we knew that it would ruffle feathers. We knew that no one voice would come out of this room. That the panelists will say one thing, that the attendees will say another, because it is a highly contentious and volatile issue. It therefore becomes important for us to discuss about it. So we prioritize it because it happened now. It involves the military, it involves international relations. It allows us to talk about the continent. It allows us to talk about an issue happening elsewhere and that affects the continent. As we go on with more interactions of this nature, we will be looking at the continent, we will be looking at the Republic of South Africa. Somebody asked a question there, what then after this? Part of the deliberations of this nature, part of the outcomes of these deliberations in the plan for this 3-part series is to eventually come out with a book on military law. That is what we're doing. We're not simply presenting papers and then leaving it at that. We want to ensure that this informs scholarship. This produces new, decolonized, Africanized knowledge on the issues that we're deliberating on here. Thank you very much for your
Thank you very much, Professor Dube. I would like to believe that the questions have been answered, although I cannot guarantee that they've been answered to the satisfaction of the person who asked the questions, but they have been answered. And as Prof pointed out, there is more. Events of this caliber will still be held because this kind of discourses you cannot deliberate and conclude in one day. I can see Advocate that he's unsettled. He wants to say something. He still wants to have this to continue to have more. But colleagues, we are really running from behind schedule, and I'm going to call to the podium the Director of School of Criminal Justice to give us a vote of thanks and a closure. And I would also request that immediately when it's done, we could just assemble for a group picture when he is done giving us closing, and then I'll also assess the readiness of the refreshments outside as he done that, and immediately when we took the picture, then we can actually head outside to indulge in the politics of the stomach. Dr. Morodi, we are ready to receive you to give us a closure of this auspicious ceremony, which some of us were thought-provoked. We learned quite a lot. I realized that in this intellectual space, there's always a but, and but. So that's how they are supposed to be, and I think that's how we learn. I mean, if one person has all the answers, I mean, then why do we have to exist? One very smart lawyer once said to me that in the legal profession, if two people always agree with each other, then one of them is not thinking. Between the two, if you always say, I concur, then one of them does not go deeper in terms of thinking. Dr. Modi, thank you very much.
I'm interested in the legal practitioner's perspective on this process.
Very good afternoon. Because I can see you have entered, the prefix good, then you are not responding, then let me say afternoon. Program director, the opportunity afforded is well received and highly commended. On behalf of the Deanship of the University of South Africa, that of College of Law, Professor Olaotsipole and Professor Fariseni Kuteri Namakonde, we are indeed very, very much humbled to be part of this particular important seminar, which Professor Dube has already alluded in terms of the plan as envisaged, in terms of where we are and where we are going, and that is because in some of the comments that I see that to me, I think Prof. Dube has responded. When we look also in terms of that, where are we going? Is this going to be a need service type of a seminar, or are we going to prove outcomes to them? Hence, we see that the College of Law saw it befitting to be part of the unfolding events in the global arena, which our spheres are affected one way or the other. You could see from the more of a healthy engagement that ensued here is that you are able to touch from politics, law, economy, regionalism, geopolitics, and others. But it shows in terms of the level of the topic or the seminar and so on is that it's topical, it's contemporary, it's relevant, and it's more appropriate. Prof. Dube, you asked some of the questions that I'm not going to respond to when you speak about when two elephants fight. But I'm told these days there are no longer elephants. It's a combination of a hippo and an elephant that are fighting. Discussing issues within the radius of the international platform. What is the position of human rights, sovereignty, ambiguity? I'm not going to come to multilateralism, but we also look also in terms of an element of say, of that of what you call cited of what you call quiet diplomacy. This is a space whereby the College of Law prides itself in saying, where are we fitting in? Are we able to respond to to those issues in terms of if the issues are vague, if there are elements of uncertainty, then we're able to say we need to conduct a research because it's a type of a phenomenon that requires element of curiosity, because research that activates what? It triggers people to start finding more about things. We don't want to be spoon-fed or to say already we've got preempted responses to that, but we want to say to satisfy our curiosity. I'm not going to dwell much in terms of the history of the relationship between Taiwan and China, but when we go back in terms of the bombardment of Jinmen in 1949, when we look in terms of the 1954, the unofficial cessation of what you call China Civil War. Those are some of the issues. I'm not going to dwell much on them. But mine is only just to say, colleagues, there are questions to be responded to. And the questions are not coming from a single narrative, but they will come not only from a dual narrative also, but they are going to come to a multifaceted nature of responses. As we say, from the quality of law is that we are looking towards a book, as Prof. Tube has already promised that I know he's working on that. We need to look in terms of particular the quality of law is to try to sponsor it. And from my budget, I can also make an allocation of it. So I would like also to take this special opportunity also to thank our special guests. Even though some were very, very parsimonious with the presentation, they tell you that certain speakers have said, but it's a space that we need to engage your own ideology. Even if the very same narrative has been done, you must be able to work like an amoeba. You must have a fixed shape. You must always say you are a chameleon now. Even though people might have done it, but you must have another dimension, another direction in terms of how do you ensure that the people are fed. You become more of a fountain from which you can drink that you. Mesoro, as always, we are very, very thankful to your contribution. You are closely looking into that. Mr. Weekend and Fela Mfekele, you didn't give us much as we wanted, and you owe us for it. But I think that will be presented in a form of an article or a form of an output. I'm not going to accept that he only gave us something that is it's not even a piece of a pie in the sky, but we need to do. Prof. Felix, we thank you for responding to the presentation and the responses also to people. It's scholarship. It's not one size fits all response, but it's a question of saying, because it's a space where we occupy, we always say, let's stretch our level of thinking. Are we thinking without the box? Are we thinking inside the box? Or are we thinking in a space whereby it's only without the box? Where do we feature ourselves? To the participants, it's much appreciated. To the questions that you have posed. They're not just easy questions. I think we must create what you call a monograph, something like that of nature, so that all these questions have been posted on the chat and all that. They need to be collated in such a way that we respond to when you compile that particular type of. To the academics, those who put aside their time, to that I know that you are. It's expected of you that you must perform at a particular level, but I know I'm stretching too much of you. But you never complain, but you are always coming to the party, and you just only give yourself a half-hearted commitment, but it's a wholly, totally, 100% commitment. I applaud your colleagues for it. And to the external stakeholders, the partners, and we highly appreciate for always availing yourselves. When every time the College of Law invites you to say, we've got a People's Assembly. The People's Assembly is to exchange notes so that we can come with solution-driven outcomes for the continent, for the country, and for the world. We are always saying we are in that state of readiness to say, indeed, you need also to be counted. And also you always say, you were there. Unfortunately, the Taiwanese that representation just left, but we also wanted to acknowledge their presence here. It's highly appreciated. And lastly, the program director, a special word of gratitude to you for directing this particular program with such a precision, with such a level of exactness, whereby we were able to say, always reminded us that we are running behind schedule. But when I look at my chronometer, but unfortunately I don't have to watch, I said, no, I'll trust yourself. But we appreciate the way you directed this particular program to its fruition. And also, more importantly, also to you also in terms of the direction of the organizing committee of this particular seminar. Your contribution has not gone unnoticed, and it's highly appreciated. And from the College of Law under the stewardship and the leadership of Professor Olausokole and Professor Mfariseni Buteri Makonde and the executive management, we are thankful for this particular opportunity. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
I just wanted to say, rather than what was in the picture, we must think of the stairs.
Okay. Thank you very much, Dr. Mrodi. Our colleagues online, this marks the official closure of our event. Thank you very much for joining us for these events. We still have more ahead. And to our guests who are physical, thank you very much. I need not to say further, I just need to officially close the ceremony. And thank you very much to our colleagues online. And to us physical here, we can just before we indulge meals, I think there is a proper spot for one nice group picture outside where we could just assemble and take a picture just before we indulge meals. I'm told that there are stairs there which would provide. I see this venue is too small for something like that. So let us just assemble outside for a group picture. Thank you very much, colleagues.